Hey, is this thing live? Are we live?
I
Eric, are
think
we live?
I think so. I hit the button.
Okay, so this is Matthew, and that's Eric, and this is the Odd Atheist Friends episode. We're in one of the 25 numbers. This is episode 50.
Fuck
So,
yeah!
fuck
Get
yeah, and
excited.
get excited. What do we always say? Oh, yeah, fuck your God, God damn it. And it's cold, and so
Oh
it's
my
not
god, it's fucking cold.
it's fucking cold, but also somebody who lives in the fucking Great White Cold, and I can't believe he's fucking here. Seth Andrews of the Thinking Atheist.
Hi,
Author.
everybody.
Hey, Seth.
Thanks for the invite. Thanks for allowing me to sit at the big kid table and hang with you guys. So, yeah.
Definitely not the cool kid table. I was never there.
The fat kid table is what he meant to say.
Whatever. Whatever.
So, Seth, you're in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, flyover state from hell, too, like Eric is in North Dakota.
You know, I give Tulsa a hard time because I can. But the truth is that, despite the overwhelming religiosity of it and, the fact that we tend to elect governors who are theocrats to the extreme. I mean, there's a lot to love about it. I mean, it's the cost of living is good. The people are largely really friendly. It's just that they don't really know what to do with an atheist. And it's weird because there are a few atheist groups here in this state that are actually doing quite well. So I've come to the conclusion that there's a big underground of atheists growing here, but largely Tulsa's the place you fly over to get to one of the hubs, to get to some other destination. This is a place you cruise through on your way somewhere else. But I've got no complaints. My life is good, and it does make for some interesting conversations from time to time. When someone asks me what I do for a living.
What didn't Oral Roberts want an 800-foot Jesus or cross or something like that at some point?
Yeah, I actually wrote about it in my book. I used to work in the building that they built. It was called the City of Faith, and Oral Roberts was a tense evangelist in the 60s, this healing evangelist, scam artist who would go and people would throw away their crutches and stand up out of their wheelchairs and blah, blah, blah. And it was all rigged. And he started a Christian university, Oral Roberts University, based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The university is still in operation today. And he told his people, he told his audience, his adoring fans, his audience, that he had a vision of a 900-foot tall Jesus that was indicative. It was actually a little bit taller than this building that he was supposed to erect in God's name. And so he did a shit ton of fundraising, and they built this monstrosity. And, a decade later, it had been sold. It was in bankruptcy and had sold. And it's amazing to me that God, who created and conjured the universe, can't keep a hospital solvent. That's bizarre. Also, why would a faith healer ever need to build a hospital? He's a faith healer, right? I mean, aren't you healing people? Why do you need a hospital? And so anyway, when it turned into office space, though, it's funny because the Christian radio station that I worked for at the time, KXOJ, actually ended up leasing space on the 59th floor. So we ended up I worked in that building for 7 years. And every time you walk around, you saw buildings, you saw rooms that were once supposed to be for ministry and for medicine. And instead, they were being leased out to, cell phone companies and debt recovery agencies and all these other things. So, yeah, it's amazing. The Lord does work in mysterious ways.
So, Seth, you're the host of the immensely popular The Thinking Atheist, and you've written books, Deconverted, which I actually just finished not that long ago, and Sacred Cows, which I listened to like a year ago. And both amazing books. And I found out that we're pretty much about the same guy at about the same time, both extremely conservative Christians who, over time, for me, it was about a period of about 6 or 7 years, just kind of like, am I fucking serious? Why do I believe this bullshit? Why did I subjugate my entire childhood to this shit? And, my 20s to this shit, and a good chunk of my 30s to this. So, do you want to talk about The Thinking Atheist and your book Deconverted and maybe Sacred Cows really fast?
You ever beat yourself up for taking so long? Like I do that to myself. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, why did it take me so long to listen to the the doubt that was in my skull. Why did it take me so long to figure out what Dillahunty calls the easiest question in the universe? Like, is there evidence for any God anywhere? And sometimes I wonder, because you hear these stories of people who are like, well, I knew when I was 6, there was no God.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So I tend to torture myself. The good news is, though, that you and I have a backstory that allows us to speak to religious cultures with some depth and perspective. We can, we're not treating them in terms of caricature, but we're actually talking about, decades long experience within the faith. And I think that allows us in some ways to be better messengers about the faith here on the other side of the looking glass. But the thinking atheist was a response to coming out of a faith culture. It used to be that it was taken on faith. Yeah, sure, there's evidence, but it really is about faith in Jesus Christ. And if you don't feel his presence, well, just fake it till you make it. He's still there anyway. Take it on faith. And so when you come out of that, you want to embrace reason and pursue the evidence and engage brain. And so the thinking atheist icon was a reminder, a representation of the rejection of faith. I just changed the intro after 9 years. I updated the intro to the Thinking Atheist podcast online. And it further explains this. It's not a person. The thinking atheist is not a person. It's an idea. It is a symbol that reminds everybody, let's keep thinking about the challenges and opportunities before us. And so I told my story. I wrote Deconverted. I guess it's been 6-7 years. Sacred Cows was more of it's sort of a secretly or clandestine comparative religions class where we bounce through some of the crazy stuff that happens in the world in the name of belief and tradition. But the subtext is, hey, the major faiths are no less crazy than, the coconut smashers and the Scientologists and all these other sort of fringe religions. They're all very similar. And so I did that. And then I released, just as a distraction, I'm a storyteller, so I released a Ghost Stories audiobook last fall, just in time for Halloween. And that's a tradition we have every October on the radio. So, I got my finger in a few pies, but, that's my story in a nutshell. Is I was raised by a fundamentalist family and Christian school, Christian church, Christian everything, Christian friends, Christian music, Christian apparel, Christian prayers. And I just, I never knew there was an option. I heard a friend, Bill Morgan, once say that it's like the parents install the Christianity program on your hard drive, and they never tell you that there's an uninstall option or that there are other programs that might run better. This is just the only program that you know. And I finally came to the point in my life when I realized this program does not run very well. This does not work very well. There are better programs. There is an uninstall for Christianity. And so I was able to sort of do that in my own life and embrace, a religion-free existence. And now I encourage other people to live their lives, take the journey on their own terms, and to question everything. So,
yeah. I was listening, like I said, I was listening to Deconverted actually not that long ago. I just finished it. I listened to audiobooks, and you were talking about the contemporary Christian music that we used to listen to back in the day. Do you remember One Bad Pig?
Oh, I do.
They were kind of, their recipe for pad thai was actually pretty good. I actually tried it.
Well, and One Bad Pig was, they were kind of this edgier, fringe is not the word, but they
were kind of heavy metal-ish, kind of grunge-ish.
Yeah. There was like mainstream, there was the safe music, and then there was the rock music, and then there was this sort of genre that they were just kind of out there, and they weren't going to play by the rules. And they're like 10 people bought their album, but they were out there, and One Bad Pig was like them,
I bought one of their albums. I did. I bought it on DVD, and what was it, like 1992? It was funny because I was stationed in Panama City, Florida at the dive school at the time. And so I go into the store. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for some contemporary Christian music, but I want something harder. I want something I want something like metal. And she's like, if the world's got it, we've got it. And she showed me over to this. It was a pretty decent sized thing, but yeah. I remember like when Rachel, do you remember them? Rachel?
Rachel actually did a cover, unfortunately, of Kansas's classic
Yes!
"Carry On My Wayward Son."
I was just about to bring that up. And it was one of those ones where it's like, I remember listening to them. I'm like, wait a minute, you did what? What the hell is wrong with you?
You just went to the mecca of classic rock music and you stole an artifact and you inscripted your name on it. You cannot remake "Carry On My Wayward Son." You cannot desecrate the temple like this. And they did, and it was terrible. And in Christian music, we thought it was the best thing ever, man, because they were rocking for the king, you know.
Oh yeah.
So anyway,
I went to a Mike Warnke concert in 1991. Was it late 1990 before he came out that everything he said was a lie? Like
it's like a year before. You caught him right before they exposed him.
Yes. And I went in uniform because I was still like burning for Christ. And I used to pray on my knees in boot camp and all that shit, man. And it's like,
yeah, Mike Warnke was a Christian comedian who claimed a background in the occult and Satan worship. He claimed to be a Satanist high priest. And Cornerstone magazine, to their credit, it was somebody in the faith. Cornerstone magazine actually started to do a little homework, and they found out that there was no evidence for any of this stuff. Yeah. And his ministry, you know, which was a multi-million-dollar enterprise, just crashed against the wall. Somebody said he's still out there somewhere. You know, you got to figure if Jim Bakker can be convicted of fraud and do prison time over Heritage USA, and today an ex-felon be on television making his millions or whatever, selling buckets of food to the faithful. If he can be successful,
or what's going to happen for after the rapture too? You know, like when the tribulation. What
if Jim Bakker can sell me a bucket that I can use to feed myself and then take a dump in after I've eaten? Then anything is then the Mike Warnkes of the world will always have a place. They'll always have an audience. James Randi used to call them the unsinkable rubber ducks. They just won't go away. There is a sucker born every minute, and it's maddening because you see people being taken advantage of, and these people who I consider sociopaths, they know it. You know, they're just going to go out and abuse the system to fill their own pockets.
Do you mind if we take a little bit of a turn here, because some things have happened in the atheist community, and then I feel I want to get your opinion and stuff on it too. I don't know if you're aware of Deborah McTaggart. We just had her on like a month ago, and we found out, like, was it 2 weeks ago now? Almost 2 weeks ago now. She just died in her sleep, and I'd had her on Friends' Facebook for a long time, and you know, we just had her on like a month ago, and she was so cool, and I really did want to have her on again because there was other stuff in her life that we wanted to talk about, but the interview was long. We talked for a long time before and after what we recorded online. She was just so cool and so giving with her time. And then, you know, your boy Henry, who passed away, and you know, he went to the vet for some teeth treatment, and he died on the table. And this, I understand that they're not equivocal, but I want to talk about death, if that's okay. Where it's like, we as atheists, it's like we don't have that, you know, we're going to see them again in the afterlife. We've got to take it in the teeth right now, and we've got to realize that they're gone. And so living this life, because it's the only one that we've got, is so much more important. And so, do you want to talk about Henry and the situations and what happened? If that's okay?
If I may, I you know, the news of Deb's passing was, I mean, it was a shock.
Yes,
it's interesting when they posted sort of this montage of photographs. The shot that she and I had taken together was among those, and I mean, you know, it's easy sometimes for us to deify people after they've gone. You know, we're always looking for these sort of things to say, but the truth is that while we weren't hugely close, we certainly knew each other, and she was a beautiful person, and you know, she leaves behind a huge vacuum, a huge hole in the hearts of people who knew her. we as rationalists who don't see any evidence for an afterlife have to come to terms with the fact that, her, for whatever reason, there may, I don't use reason with a capital R. Like, it was her time. I don't really do that. There was a series of circumstances that resulted in her premature death, and the rest of us are left behind to try to, carry forward with us what we knew of her and the good things that she'd brought to the table, the ideas that she was a part of. And I think that's all you can do. I understand the desire to, for someone who might want to say in a religious context, oh, one day, in a few decades, we'll see her again at the pearly gates, and we'll wrap our arms around her, and we'll all be together again. I mean, it's not hard to understand why this narrative is appealing. And, but it's in my own life, when I stopped believing in heaven and hell, it's weird, because I was convinced I was going to heaven. When I stopped believing, when I realized I didn't believe in it, I actually became less afraid of death. It's weird. And I became more focused on the now and trying to, solve problems in the here and now. You'd mentioned Henry. Of course, I in my own life I won't equate the death of a pet to the death of a human being.
Of course not. That's not what I was intimating.
No. I think you qualified that, and I totally know. But it was like, we grieved more for little Henry than I have grieved for. I've lost friends in car wrecks. I've lost but he was our family. He was a little rescue that was a part of almost every minute of my day. And it's hard to describe, what it was like, taking him in for what was supposed to be a dental procedure, and then his heart stops on the table, and the vet calls you. My wife calls me, and she's unable to find words. It's just like pain is all I hear through the phone, just pain. And it was hard. And because he had become one of the de facto sort of mascots of my work, because I was always putting him on camera along with Rat Dog,
I remember.
People all over the world knew him and took him into their hearts, and they grieved with us. And so we were hoping to do something good out of this mess. And so as we're weeping and hugging each other, and we just feel, where is he? There's a big hole in our lives. I called the Humane Society of Tulsa, which had rescued him back in 2014. And I said, what do you need? And they have an old van that is just about on its last mile, and it has to be jump started out of the lot. And it's just a nightmare. Nobody wants to take it. They can't use it in the summer because it has no air conditioning, and the dogs will literally die of heat stroke if they try to transport them. And so we're like, great, let's do that. And we found out that all the vans that are a product of contributions are named after the animals in their memory. So, well, let's do a Henry van. We set a goal of $15,000 for a used van, and the listeners raised that in 5 hours. So we raised the goal.
Jesus Christ.
We raised the goal to 25, and they hit that within a day. And so right now we're at $33,000, and the Humane Society is going to buy a larger van that accommodates more animals, fully air conditioning. They're going to wrap it with the Humane Society decor, and then Henry's face and name are going to be on it somewhere. And I think the caption I'd like to have included is, for Henry and those who loved him. And so then thousands of animals are going to be rescued in his name for years and years. So his legacy kind of lives on. And that's how we're dealing, is to try to bring something out of it. Forgive the long answer, but that's kind of where we are. So,
as a former Christian, it's like, when you think about it, it's like, well, it's like, oh, well, we'll meet our people, our people, we're going to be there. And don't get me wrong, I was always, I'm not trying to equate people and pets and all, but when I realized that I wasn't going to see my pets again, that hit me harder than not seeing grandma.
There's an innocence about them, and there's a loyalty about them. And I think I heard somebody say, we need to stop comparing, and I'm guilty of this, comparing grief, because grief is grief.
Yes.
And I think I agree. I would never try to minimize the loss of a precious human life, but we also don't minimize the impact that animals can have, because they are friends, they are companions, they do have personalities, and they feel things like joy and pain, and they're sentient creatures, and they are a part of, they're woven so deeply into the fabric of our lives. So to minimize it because, oh, it's just an animal, and I think is a huge cheat.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I, will I get another dog? We still have rat dog, but will we get another rescue? I'm sure we will. In fact, I think there's a possibility that maybe the Henry van will bring us the next member of our family sometime later this year. I don't know. But we have a lot of love to give here, so we're gonna probably try to do that. We just need some time. It's weird, the things you learn about yourself. And again, I don't mean to wax on too far, but
you're okay.
I learned about, like, I'm not a sentimental person in the sense that I don't keep photographs, and I don't hold on to a bunch of stuff. Like, my family's always like, we have an old photo album. Would you like it? And I'm like, I'm good. Just put it somewhere. We have this old piece of furniture. We have this. Would you like that? No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm not sentimental about that stuff. But when we lost Henry, we were going to bury him or whatever. And I know he's gone. Like, I know the body will decompose and he's gone. But I was like, Natalie and I were like, I can't bury him. I can't put him in the yard. I can't do that. We decided, and this is the first time I've ever done it, to have him cremated. And we had a candle urn made, engraved, and it says, Henry, rescued by a few, loved by thousands. And we have a little votive candle on the top, and it's like a little battery powered candle that comes on at night. And it's weird, the kind of comfort that gives me. Like, he's still kind of around, at least his memory's around. I know it's not him, but there's a part of me that, I learned that I kind of needed that. And it's bizarre to think about. I don't know. Has anyone else ever gone through that?
Have you seen, there's like this thing where, like, you can take parts of ashes of people and turn them into diamonds, and they will make laboratory diamonds out of the ashes of people, and you can keep them around.
Oh, I met somebody who had a paw print tattooed on their body, and they had their dog's ashes incorporated into the ink, so that the dog's was always with them in that way. And where a few years ago I'd have been like, oh, that's a bit excessive. Now I'm like, that's beautiful. Like,
Eric?
that is so beautiful.
Eric?
Yeah. My dog died when I went to Africa a couple of years ago to teach. And so I got my boyfriend at the time to take her actual paw print, and then, like, with ink, and then I got it tattooed on my chest. I didn't have any of her ashes in it, but it's her real paw print. Like,
that is something that when you see it, it reminds you of a beautiful time and a beautiful relationship you had with an animal that brought you so much love and joy. I get it. I get it. I love it.
Yeah. It was the expression that I've heard is that animals are only part of our lives, but we are all of theirs. And so it's like, there are two things you should never do around me. Hit a woman, well, three things. Hit a woman, hit a child, hit an animal. Yep. You are going to get full Matthew. And so, yeah.
Well, it's like, and I'm guilty of this. Maybe it's because, the animals are so trusting. But if I read a headline and it's like, so-and-so was beaten during a convenience store robbery, I'm like, that's awful. That's terrible. And then I read another headline that says someone beat a dog, and I'm like, death penalty. There's just something primal that happens inside of me.
Put you in a cage and spray you with cold water every 3 hours for, I don't know, the next 15 years.
Well, one good thing that has come out of a lot of this, the story of Henry, is being able to draw a circle around the evil of these puppy mills, where they take these animals by the dozens or hundreds and breed them for money, and the animals live just the most miserable lives of suffering and isolation. And who could do this? And I try, it's hard to stay encouraged about the human condition when you see what people will do for money. But whenever I get too discouraged, I think about all the thousands of people who have pledged themselves to the advocacy and rescue of these animals. And I realize that there is still much good left in the world.
I was stationed in Spain, and when I was living in Spain, we had a basset hound. We had a tricolor female. And it's actually I've heard that tricolor for females are pretty rare. But anyway, she was a great dog, Luna. I'll never forget her. She was my first basset hound, and basset hounds are actually really full of expression. And I think just because they got those droopy jowls that they don't smile and they don't laugh, they do. And so it's like really got to look back at the corners of the mouth. So, but anyway, so she was a great dog. But about a year and a half after we got her, my wife and I were looking around for another one because, you know, it's like we were both working and we didn't want Luna in the house by herself. We knew she wasn't going to get destructive, but we didn't want her to get bored. So we started looking, and that's all we were. We were looking. So we came upon this flyer, basset hounds for sale. And it turned out to be a puppy mill. And the one that was there was the last dog. And apparently the owner's son had been abusing the dog and like kicking the dog around, literally kicking the dog around. So we're like, we didn't really have the money, but we spent the money. It was like $200, and it's like, you know, military salary. People say, "Oh, military people got money." No, we don't. But you know, it's like, so it's like I dropped the $200 just to get the dog out of there, just so the dog wouldn't die. And I took her to our vet that we had in Spain, and the vet told us, she's like, "This dog would have been dead within weeks if you hadn't have gotten her out."
Wow.
And so she was seriously psychologically damaged because of all the abuse that she had gotten. And about 2 years later, we ended up having to put her down because she was just so damaged and so bad. But we gave her the love, all the love that we could in the time that we had her. And Millie, I feel bad for her, but I'm just sad that we got to her so late. That's my regret.
I do the tattoo, but I'm totally a weenie. I don't know. How bad is the tattoo hurt about right here? It's just
it's real, especially if it's really small. It's not bad at all, to be honest.
No, I'm a big baby. I mean, I'm serious.
I honestly, it's really not that bad.
All right. Well, I saw somebody it was yesterday who had one right here on the inner wrist, and I just thought, oh my God.
I have a lot of tattoos.
Like how many nerve endings are there? So,
well, yeah. I have 3 tattoos. Eric, how many do you have?
I have 21.
21?
21. Yeah.
Well,
now, are they addictive? Like, do you get one and want to go get another one? Is that true?
Yeah, but I mean, I think a lot of people can stop at like 1 if you just really want one. But yeah, after I got my first one, I just wanted a bunch more, and I want a bunch more now.
They call it tattoo therapy. They really do.
I mean, if they're done well, they're gorgeous. They're cool. And then there are the other ones. There was a television show that I was fascinated by for a while called Tattoo Nightmares. And, like the guy who is drunk, he goes in drunk and his girlfriend says, "Hey, give my boyfriend the tattoo needle. It'll be fun." And then, of course, they wake up the next day and realize what they've done. And they wear this horror for 10 years. And then they go into these amazing artists who can sort of see through that, and they'll tattoo something over it or in through it and turn it into art. Pretty amazing. So,
hey, Seth, Eric and I have something. Our listeners know this, and we want to give a shout out, of course, to our patrons and all of our patrons, but of course to Molly and Trevor, who are our top patrons, of course. But something that we want to talk about, we have our tattoo of our logo on our asses. So where's your tattoo of your logo, Seth? Wow. Why isn't it on your ass?
Wow.
Mine says, "Fuck your God, God damn it," on my ass.
Mine says, "Fuck you," and the logo.
So, I mean, did you walk into the tattoo artist and you say, "Look, I would like you to tattoo this"?
I went there the day before because Eric was coming in. And so this is the second time I met Eric actually in person. Mm-hmm. And so we went in, and I went in the day before, and I'm like, "We want to get this tattoo done." And so the guy quoted me a price for getting it done. And the next day we went in with I know now my 4th cousin who I just met and watched me get my ass tattooed.
Well, that's commitment, I will say. That's commitment. Yeah. No, I'm not doing that. I mean, I'm all in. I'm definitely I'm for the cause, but there will be no Thinking Atheist logo tattooed on my ass. Sorry, no, not doing
Wimp.
I know. I mean, if it's all relative, apparently I've failed the commitment test. But no, I've never. I don't know. I thought about, you know, like getting a little tattoo of Henry's paw somewhere. I just, you know, I think you never. I've just never thought I could pull off a tattoo. I just, you know, it doesn't help that I look like Ferris Bueller, and just the idea of me with a tattoo doesn't. I just don't see that. But you know, you never know. Yeah, maybe one day I'll do it. So.
Ferris Bueller in middle age, but yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I promise, if you get a really small tattoo, it's super easy.
Okay.
And my tattoos, if I didn't tell you I had them, you wouldn't know.
Right.
And so, you know, I was in the Navy for 20 goddamn years too. And so you've, of course, seen, you know, like guys all tatted up and that kind of stuff. And I always thought that just looked, you know,
yeah, well,
for
you
me,
know, I would
in
think
uniform.
You know, you walk in with "fuck your God" tattooed on your, you know, on your forearm. It probably makes potential employers give you a second look. I can imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, on my butt, nobody's gonna see that. It's actually on my right butt cheek. But yeah.
All right. Well, geographically, I understand what you're talking about. So.
You know, we've been kind of talking around it a little bit, and you know, both of us have been, you know, we were Christians for I don't know 25 years, Massimino, and so I don't know about you, Seth, but I think I'm glad you are the way that you are, because we need people in this world who are, hey, you know, this is how we think, but I am just so goddamn angry about being lied to, about being programmed, about losing like my teenage years, about losing my 20s and my early 30s, and all the friends and stuff that I pushed away, the dorkiness that shouldn't have been so bad because I was the one wanting to read the fucking Bible in the goddamn lunchroom. You know, I mean,
Eric, do you is that true? Is Matthew is he angry? Does he have some anger issues?
Well, I'll just say don't ride in a car with him when he's driving, but that might be more of a Chicago thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that's more of a Chicago thing. We got one hand on the horn, the other, and the one on the horn goes to the middle finger.
Yeah.
So
driving with your knees, horn hand, and then you've got the middle finger out the window. I get that. So
yep.
Yeah, I was angry more so when I first came out of the faith. You know, I'm not mad at mom and dad for teaching me what they thought was true. That's not the part that angers me, because I see them as victims of bad ideas. Like if they knew they were lies, if they weren't 100% convinced and they taught it to me anyway, it would be easier to be pissed off at them for what was taught. But they were just victims of bad ideas. They had children. They felt like this was what they were charged to do as moral people. And so, I mean, I kind of get that. What makes me angry is the intolerance and the disrespect and the boundary crossing and the condescension and the lack of listening. You know, whenever now I go and I try to have a relationship with a religious mother and father, they believe that unless the eternal question is answered, unless I am fixed, unless the prodigal is brought home, that nothing else can really be enjoyed. So if I say, hey, like I've invited them over to have dinner, this was 2 years ago, a little less. I said, you know, be great to have you over. We'll have you over to the house. And I had mom on the phone, and she didn't want to come. And I asked why. And it's because I pay the mortgage with money made as an activist, as an atheist activist. And she feels then that it is devil money. And so, you know, this is what pisses me off. Like, if you want to be religious, knock yourself out. But the idea that you can't even come to my home, the home of your son, because you feel like you would be infected or endorsing, or I don't know what your rationalization is. That's the stuff that makes me crazy. The passive aggressive stuff over the Thanksgiving table. By the way, did you hear that article about how evolution has been debunked by real scientists? And somebody else is like, why no? Tell me about it. I mean, that stuff will make you flat out crazy. And, you know, they're cordoning off other people, deciding whether or not the nephews and nieces can be Facebook friends with you because Lord knows we don't want them exposed to a different opinion. That kind of stuff really does make me angry. And anger, I think, is a healthy response. It's natural. I mean, of course we're angry. I just think the people who are only angry, I grieve for them a little bit. And there's a group of people out there that they are just nonstop rage. And I get they've been wounded. I get that they have justifiable anger, but I would hate to think that they're living the rest of their lives without enjoying some good stuff and without, you know, enjoying their lives on their terms and those types of things. You know, balance it's possible, and I think it's important.
It's kind of a segue a little bit. We both remember we've talked about it a couple of times on the podcast, and I know you've done on yours, but the satanic panic in the 80s and the early 90s and how bad it was. And, you know, backmasking, you know, you just did something, you know, on backmasking a little while ago, I think. Yeah. But so we were both there, and I remember it was like, I think it was like 1984 is when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, 1983, 1984. And I remember one of the elders of the church, their wife said something about, oh, well, Dungeons and Dragons is like you're praying to the devil and you're casting spells. And I've said that, I'm like, I've been playing at that point for like 2 years, and I'm like, well, you know, rolling a die and say I cast a spell is not actually casting spells, and I've never worshipped the devil. So did you dabble in D&D even back then?
No, I was, you know, my buddies did. I never played it. We heard those warnings that, you know, you're not just playing a game, that D&D was the equivalent of a Ouija board. You would be tapping into, sort of teasing the boundaries of satanic activity. And you know, there would be all these horror stories. They passed out these chick tracts that would talk about the people who, you know, they played and they pretended to be a warlock and they became a warlock, you know, that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's amazing the stuff that the Christianity of the 80s and 90s, especially, and the satanic panic is still around to a degree. But I mean, they found the devil in everything. I mean, everything from Ozzy Osbourne records to Smurfs and Teddy Ruxpin to He-Man, Masters of the Universe, because there's only one master and that's Jesus, that kind of stuff. It's just,
I've heard him say that He-Man is gay too, and so that's why, you know, another reason why they don't want their kids looking at He-Man is because, you know, it's like, oh, he's so buff, but it's like they see like an undertones of homosexuality into it somehow.
Yeah.
And so they don't, I mean, what?
Oh, you know, one of the illustrator from my second book, Sacred Cows, is a gentleman named Vince DePorter, and he's one of the illustrators for SpongeBob. And we were talking about how the Christian culture had this big warning years and years ago that SpongeBob was gay, and that SpongeBob cartoons were secretly subverting the Bible's teachings by normalizing homosexuality. And I remember thinking to myself,
they said the same thing about the Smurfs too.
Yeah, the Smurfs, My Little Pony, that was supposed to be satanic in some way. I mean, everything. Star Wars was satanic. And these are people who I think were just looking around for anything that's, you know, that invoked fantasy fiction or that conveniently sort of molded into their worldview that we are in the end times and Satan's on full assault and that we must be vigilant in the war, the spiritual war of light versus darkness. Now I look back and we just see how ridiculous it was. And we also see how tragic it was. I mean, I was in a 6th grade elementary classroom and they had somebody come in and they played records backwards to listen for satanic messages. As an exercise in why we shouldn't participate in the world. And what this does is it fosters in young minds a fear of the other. It teaches them magical thinking. And I think it's really kind of abusive. It abuses the trust of a young child. And, you know, it's something that when I see young children now who are being told, you know, the devil lurks in the darkness, and they're kidnapping virgins on Halloween, and all these, you know, all these weird things they tell them in this sort of satanic panic narrative. I just think you're abusing the trust of an impressionable child who deserves better. And it's one of the reasons I think that all of us do what we do, is we're hoping eventually the kids will find what we're doing, grow into adults and find what we're doing, and learn that it's okay to doubt, it's okay to question. And if it doesn't make sense, well, you know, keep digging. Let's find out what does.
Was it, I hear that, this is only something I heard, I haven't seen any statistics or data, but that the younger kids, because of the internet and the liberalization, small L, not big L, of stuff, is now that the younger people, like Generation Y and Generation Z and that kind of stuff, are way more atheistic now than what we were, of course. I mean, you know, it's like we grew up in the same era, so it was like, oh, you know, it's like when I went to Charleston, it was like my first ship was stationed in Charleston, South Carolina, and they asked me like what religion I was, and I said Plymouth Brethren, and they said, oh, well, you need to come to our church and get real saved.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and that was one of the things where, thinking about it later, it's like, how many times did I hear something similar and be like, you know, it's like, you know, what is, you know, it's the No True Scotsman, and they're doing it themselves, you know.
Well, we are seeing a tremendous lack of religiosity. I mean, even those who are not atheists, who claim like kind of a storefront religion, they are secular. I mean, you know, these young people that don't really go to church, they don't need church, they don't speak in religious language, they certainly don't know anything about the Bible or the Quran or whatever. They just, you know, yeah, praise the Lord, you know, they'll join in before maybe a Thanksgiving or Christmas prayer, but they just not involved. They don't care about the prejudices of their parents' religion. You know, they have gay friends, and they are gay themselves, and they don't want to be part of the model that ostracizes them, and they want women to be able to decide what happens to their own bodies. And so they're not going to jump into the abortion fight because they think, well, hey. And so the only challenge that does present, I mean, it brings some opportunities because we are seeing them less engaged with religion. I think one challenge we have with the 30 and unders is that you'll find a lack of urgency, the apatheist, because religion hasn't really spoken to their lives. They don't sense the urgency of why we need to be vigilant in fighting these superstitious theocracies, the influence they have over children, cultures, politics, etc. You know, to try to get them to feel that in their bones is so much more difficult because they were never really indoctrinated as kids themselves. And that's a little bit of a challenge. I think we have to continue to tell them, don't give up the fight, you know, engage where you can. This does matter. So,
what do you think about, switch to politics for a minute? I know that you've said some negative things about our current president.
You mean truthful things?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my bad. Yeah. But so what do you think about the shutdown and the end of the shutdown and how that went down?
Well, you know, I never. You know, politicians, especially at the highest levels, have always been positioned or positioned themselves. I say always, usually in a kind of savior model. You know, they're going to come in and we're going to undo the politics of old, and we're going to bring people together, and we're going to provide solutions, and we're going to fix the problems, and this is going to be a new chapter, you know. And we often see much of the same kind of politics as usual stuff that kicks in. But what we're seeing now with Trump is something so unique, so aberrant, so unlike anything that any of us have ever experienced before. To see the level of dishonesty and recklessness, and he's just, I'm convinced he is an absolute sociopath. You know, when Tony Schwartz's ghostwriter for Art of the Deal comes forward and tells the New Yorker that, look, I made almost all of it up, all this bullshit that you read in the book, we fabricated a narrative, which he made sort of the brand for his life. He says, we made all that stuff up. It's not true. And beware, be careful. This guy's a sociopath. He He cannot empathize with other people. He is a black hole that will suck in everything in its path. Beware. And I think the most telling thing for me has not been Trump, because we all, those of us who were looking honestly, knew what he was at the beginning. But I heard someone say that Trump is like the black light at a crime scene. Trump is exposing all of the stains that we may not have been able to see before. And so what Trump has done is his presidency has exposed an amount of bias and bigotry and awfulness and tribalism and nationalism and all these other things that were there but weren't yet pulled into full focus. And he has galvanized those things. And I'm honestly a little terrified.
I'm a lot terrified of this.
I tell you that probably and beyond that, even I'm surrounded by these Bible thumping God believers who are still convinced that he is God's man. And my parents included. They're like
the guy who literally cheated on every one of his wives.
Yeah, he breaks. I did a whole video. It's called Christians for Donald Trump, that went through like the best verses of the Bible that talked about don't be greedy, don't be arrogant, don't take vengeance, don't lust, don't bear false witness. And we just jumped in and we stuck in some Trump sound bites using his own words. And there's a weird blind spot that these people have, they've created it themselves, where they refuse to see any of the awfulness, and any criticism of Trump somehow falls under this weird Christian persecution narrative. And I do not get it. And I'm like, well, how awful does it have to be before these supposedly good people will stand on the side of goodness? And it hasn't happened yet. And it just makes my heart sink. I just fear for the future of the entire culture.
So yeah, it's all pretty frightening, but I'm kind of hoping that good people with common sense, and it looks like it's starting to happen, because there's going to be a backlash, and I think that backlash is happening. And
it is possible after the shutdown that there are a few Republicans who now will find it politically expedient to turn on him, because I'm thinking any moral Republican would have turned against this insanity long ago. But even if it's politically expedient for them to do it, at least if we can do something to neutralize the threat. And I saw a bumper sticker it was a political campaign sticker for 2020. It said, "Any functioning adult 2020." That's who I'm voting for. A functioning adult would be nice.
It's like when he first started announcing, I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, just for a few minutes, just to say, because we didn't know anything about this guy. When he did the of the reporter, I knew right then and there that this guy was going to be a shit show. And I didn't realize that every day was going to be worse. And
it stands in front of the Republican National Committee, and we're talking about a nation of 300 and however many million people. Yeah. And he says, with all these problems, and his quote is, "I alone can fix it," meaning that you, above all the educators, the scientists, the lawyers, the politicians, the Nobel laureates, the great thinkers, the philosophers, the problem solvers, the business owners, of all of these hundreds of millions of people, you alone. And this is how cult leaders operate. I mean, it's the language is so alarming. And then you watch the crowd cheer. That's the most, it's not surprising Trump said it, because he is a raving lunatic. What's interesting is to watch the thousands of people who cheered when he said it. And that's terrifying. And any functioning adult, 2020. We're starting to see some worthy names enter their name into the hat. And some people chide me for talking politics on my atheist show, but because 93% of his base is white evangelicals, and because they're promoting Christian privilege and invoking the name of God, and he's got Franklin Graham and Paula White and all these other people who were out there shilling for him. I mean, there's a bleed over between religious influence and the Trump presidency. We can't not talk about it. We have to go and and address the religious damage where it's being done. And right now it's being done in the White House.
Pretty much. Let's try to do something a little fun. We've been playing this game called No Trumps. And what I do is that I'm going to give my best Trump accent, which is horrifying.
Oh, no.
No?
You can try.
I can try. I'll try to give you my best Trump. There'll be 2 quotes. And so it'll be up to you and Eric to find out which Trump is Trump. Which quote is Trump.
All right.
So one will be Trump, one will not be.
Just a race or just whenever? I mean,
I'll give you both, and then just tell me which one you think is Trump.
All right.
Okay. Question number 1. Well, quote number 1. I have never seen a thin thinking person drink Diet Coke. That was number 1. Okay. Number 2. Walmart. Do they make walls there?
Are Eric and I in competition to find out to answer first, or is it just what we think?
It's just what you think.
I think it's number 1. I think number 1's the Trump quote.
Okay. I really just want it to be number 2, so I'm gonna say 2, but it's probably not.
Okay, the first one is Trump. Number 1 was Trump. I've never seen a thin person drinking Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Is this an actual game?
Yeah, well, I bought it at a mall kiosk, for like $15 or what it was. And so.
All right. That'd be fun at parties.
Yeah. It's funny because how many Diet Cokes does he drink a day?
I have no idea.
But yeah, so, I mean, some of the staff at the White House, like the White House staff, have commented about how many Diet Cokes he drinks a day. The second one was Paris Hilton, by the way.
Oh, well.
So that vapid waste of life. Number 2. And I think that all Christian voters should start looking at global warming and extreme poverty as a religious issue that speaks to the culture of life. That was number 1. Number 2. The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make the manufacturing non-competitive.
Number 2.
2.
Number 2? Yeah, number 2 was Trump. Number 2 was Trump. Number 1 was Al Franken.
Wow.
That surprised me too. Al Franken.
All right.
Okay.
Final round.
Final round. Number 1. I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, can you respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you? Number 2. You must never be satisfied with losing. You must get angry, terribly angry about losing.
Number 1.
Seth's gonna have to think about this one. You think number 2, huh?
Yeah, it's almost a wash, but I think I know he likes to talk about winners and losers, and he wants to. But so I'll go with 2 just for the hell of it.
Okay, number 1 was Trump.
I'm wrong.
Number 2 was Richard Nixon. It's funny how close Richard Nixon and Donald Trump seem to be. It's just that Donald Trump is the nth degree Richard Nixon.
No, Trump. I just finished the Bob Woodward book called Fear about the Trump presidency.
I've listened to it twice.
Interesting to hear the language that Trump uses. He talks about winners and losers. And if you're not, if you're not on my team, you're a loser, and he talks a lot about strength and weakness, meaning that if you do this, you're weak. If you do that, you're weak. But his idea of strength is sort of that alpha male caricature of strength, that sort of bravado, chest thumping strength, that crush your enemies, which doesn't have room again for empathy and sympathy and raising the bar for all humanity and helping people in need and those types of things. In his world, strength is winning, but his definition of strength is to crush the weak. And you'll see that's why he, in many ways, admires Kim Jong-un and says words of admiration about Putin and those types of things, because he sees them as people who, hey, they get things done. They don't put up with any crap, and they're strong. They're not weak. And this is it's alarming because, when you have a leader who cannot empathize and who cannot reach out and help other people in an hour of need, you essentially have someone who has the capability of squashing those weaker than him or less influential or less powerful. That's a terrifying thing to behold. I think that's why he's dangerous and must be removed.
So, Seth, do you want to give yourself a plug again before we take off?
I mean, yeah, if anybody's interested, I host a weekly podcast that drops every Tuesday. The patrons get it early, but it's just called The Thinking Atheist. You can find it at Spreaker.com. You can find it on Spotify, iTunes, all major podcast apps. We just submitted to iHeartRadio, so it may be on iHeart here by, March or April. We deal with usually a topic or theme every single week. Sometimes we'll just do a potpourri of phone calls, but we talked about the faith healers. I'm releasing a show that talks about God as a silent witness to atrocity. We're going to get into street epistemology, how to change minds. I don't know. We just do a lot of fun stuff. I occasionally will produce some video content as well. And all that is sort of compiled along with links to other shows and resources and books and whatnot at thethinkingatheist.com. So if you're interested, just log on to the site and it'll link you up. Thethinkingatheist.com.
Seth, thank you very much for joining us. It has been amazing. And of course, if you ever want to come back on and grace us with your dulcet tones, please feel free at any time.
Well, it's an honor to be invited, and I appreciate you both, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. So
Thanks
greatly
for being
appreciate
on.
it again. You betcha.
Thanks, Seth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is Matthew, and for Eric, this has been Odd Atheist Friends, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.